Yeah. Bruskern.
That's it.
Okay. It's pretty easy. People ask me about my last name. It's Butte. Um, no one, very infrequently does anyone ever get it wrong. Yours, I think, would be even less likely to be said wrong.
Less likely, but still likely enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. The careful calculus involved in moving from live to virtual events while keeping it human. That's what today's guest has spent much of 2020 focused on. For years, he's worked to bring together businesses, entrepreneurs, and investors to build the world's strongest network of financial service innovators. He's co-founder and CEO of Lendit FinTech, the largest media and events company dedicated to transformation in lending and digital banking. He's also right up the road from me in Denver, Colorado. Bo Bruskern, welcome to the Customer Experience Podcast.
Thanks, Ethan. It's a tremendous pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have the conversation. We'll probably talk a little bit of video too. I love to talk video when I can, and I'm always curious to know how other people are using it. But we'll start here, Bo, where I always start, which is customer experience. When I say that, what does it mean to you? What thoughts does it conjure?
Yeah, the customer experience to me is the comprehensive feel that a company has as it interacts with its primary commercial relationship. And expanding on that a little bit, for us, we're a digital media company. So the customer experience for us is, a consumer of our content. Uh, ha, as a consumer of our content, how does the customer interact with us, feel about us as they're interacting with us, engage with us, respond to us, and then move on in a better in a better way, using the value that we've provided. That entire relationship to me is the customer experience.
I like it very much. You said the word feel twice and ended there with relationship. I think that is really the heart of it as well. I've had that question answered a variety of different ways, but there are a lot of themes that are consistent. And that feeling that we leave people with as they interact, as they engage, as they respond really is the thing. I mean, that feeling is what begets the conscious thoughts, which then begets the behaviors, whether it's writing positive online reviews or making a referral or something not as attractive. So for folks who aren't familiar, tell us about Lendit FinTech. Like, who's your ideal customer? What do you solve for them? And perhaps do you have more than one customer?
We do, in the sense that we're a B2B company and again, a media company. So what we provide is news and information and analysis and commentary. And we don't provide that all ourselves. We're not necessarily just journalists by any stretch, and we're not necessarily cheerleaders for this world of financial service innovation. And I'll just take a step back and say fintech is an important concept. It's financial technology. Fintech is where you imagine your bank, which used to be a place where you'd go into the branch and conduct business, is now very much in your pocket. And there are certain things that enable that to happen, and that's all technology. So fintech is the part of banking that leads us into the future. And let's take a step further and say it is also the thing that rescues a great deal of people that are right now suffering. So the one measure of financial services efficiency is the financial capabilities of the poorest among us. And there's a lot of poor around the world who can be lifted by better financial technology. So this is not just a first world problem we're dealing with. This is a global phenomenon. Okay, so that's all preamble for what are we doing?
No, that's good. It's super interesting.
It is. It's a fascinating place to be, and so our customers are those people that are innovating in financial services. They could be the chief innovation officer at a large U.S.-based bank. They could be a entrepreneur who's starting a business to do better digital identity verification out of Tel Aviv. Or they could be, XYZ service provider out of another, let's say, venue or country. But the thing that's unifying them is this idea that we can improve our current engagement with financial services. Now, so that's our core customer. Who pays us are the companies that want to get in front of their buyers.
Yeah, and that's the media business
That
aspect of
is
it then.
right.
Yeah. How do you manage those two different types? I mean, obviously, um, essentially, I don't want to minimize it in any way, but you're building audience, and then in order to build and serve and advance the mission that of connecting people in order to enhance transformation, enhance innovation, et cetera, you then also have this customer that you use to monetize that audience and attention in order to support the mission. Is that basically fair?
That is so fair. It is exactly right. So we think of ourselves as being an important part of the community, and the community exists with or without us. I mean, to be perfectly fair, we are. But what we're trying to do is be a point of conversation, sort of like a nexus for the conversation to take place, and building the audience and nurturing the audience is a part of that. And that's not necessarily now there are a variety of different ways you could do that. You could throw a party, right? That is one way to gather an audience. Another way is to challenge a way of thinking, and that's another way to gather an audience who's listening to that challenging remark and who wants to hear the answer to it, right? The defense of it. So we play in as many different ways as we can gather and energize an audience. We try to engage there. And the analogy for the party is a conference, right? A large scale live event, which we used to do back when that was legal. But along comes COVID, and our business model had to change. That's one of the ways in which media companies, even companies like the Wall Street Journal or Gartner or Bloomberg, they all run events, and events were a big part of their business. And so that's sort of one of the ways that we try to engage the audience and then monetize it.
Yeah. So we'll get into that transformation that you have that was forced upon you uh, by the pandemic, because you're holding huge events in the United States, in Europe, Latin America, China every year. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I want to go back approximately 8 years or so. You co-founded Lend It, and I'm curious to know, you said this community exists with us or without us, but there's obviously some kind of a hole there that you identified and looked to fill. Kind of, what were your thoughts and your co-founder's thoughts at the time? Like what was the need or the opportunity in that community that you stepped in and fulfilled?
It was really a need for information and analysis and relationship. And it turns out relationship is a huge part of that puzzle, but we were really just looking for information. We wanted to go to a conference to learn more about the business we had gotten into. We were all entrepreneurs. And we had started a fintech, which is to say a company it was in the asset management space, that was going to apply technology to the idea of wealth management and make it easier, sort of a wealth front for complex securities. And it was a really interesting idea, and involved a lot of the players in the space that were making a lot of, at the time we felt like it was a lot of noise, and little did we know we were the very early end of this whole phenomenon. But there were companies like Lending Club and Prosper and SoFi and Funding Circle, and companies that you may or may not have heard of. And we needed to gather them in one place so we could learn more about their business models and how we could interact with them. There was no conference that did that. And so we decided, well, let's send out some invitations and get these people to come. Why are they going to want to come? Well, we'll put them on stage. Well, who's going to watch them? I don't know. We'll market it. We'll send out an email. We'll find somebody who has a big email list. And that's literally, that was how it germinated. Now, interestingly, about 2 weeks before our quote unquote kickoff conference, we had maybe 50 registrations for this thing. And we were like, this is going to be an embarrassment. And if we can just find a way to scrape together 150 people, well, by the time the conference rolled around, we had 325 with another 50 standing outside the door. We were breaking fire code. It was a hot, sweaty mess in this tiny little room we had rented in Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, and it was awesome. The information flow was amazing. The relationships, the meetings that we had, first time face-to-face meetings among a lot of these people who came around this idea of, we got to learn more about this new thing. And fintech's been around for decades, but it really, like, its moment is still ahead of us, but it was building back here in 2013 or so. So that's how it started. We had an idea, we had a need ourselves, and then once we had successfully put on that show, we had everybody coming back to us saying, "Oh, would you please do that again? And oh, by the way, I'd like to sponsor it." So we had a business.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's go to the hard pivot. I've had a couple conversations with with some folks who've had to make hard pivots, including Corey McCarthy, who works at a software company called Socio. She's CMO, and they produce events for organizations like yours. And they provided tools and equipment for associations and membership groups generally to do in person stuff. So, this isn't a completely new conversation on this show, and certainly everyone's business has been affected or transformed in some way. But, let's go to, because the relationships are a big deal. Tell me where you diverge if you do. Relationships are a big deal. They're best built face to face. There are so many unexpected, unknown positive benefits downstream. Like, I just think about the years that you've been doing this, from that initial fire code breaking experience, and how much positive impact there's been that you probably are completely unaware of, given all the positive stuff that you are aware of. So in any case, obviously in person is the thing. And so you got up to a point where you were doing multiple major conferences around the globe. Talk about that first 30 to 60 days or so where you realized, okay, we're going to have to pull up the stakes on the first one because that's the nearest term scenario. Like, you know, what was that experience like? And what considerations did you have at the time? Obviously, I think first about your team members and the challenge that puts on them, but you obviously had some sponsors, and that relationship is obviously affected, and certainly the community itself is probably looking for, how does this hole get filled or whatever. But like, go back to the degree that you can, and maybe share some of the things that went better than you expected, or surprises along the way.
For sure. So one of the things that occurred to us early was that there were two things happening. One is we couldn't gather. So our business model of selling tickets and sponsorships and exhibition space, where people put up physical booths to attract their customers and have this big conference expo type event, was just verboten. We could not do it. Okay. The second thing that was happening is our customers needed information fast. They couldn't wait for the pandemic to be over for us to rent space, for us to put up booths, for us to put people on stage to talk about, hey, what should we be doing right now? The conversations needed to happen now. And the relationships that matter to them still mattered. In fact, mattered even more. So what do we do in that context? We have to just completely throw out our old business model and say, look, at least for now, physical is just not going to happen. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of denial and anger and all the emotions that go along with that kind of a change, for me as a leader, because 2020 was going to be our best year yet. We had everything dialed. We were going to crush our big conference in 2020, in USA, in New York, which is our May conference. And we had 170 sponsors lined up. We had thousands of tickets. And everything was moving along brilliantly. And the team was just performing so well. So yeah, there was a lot of emotion going through that. But I was holed up luckily for me, I was able to take my family and move up to the mountains and we holed up there, and I brought my my camera equipment, and I had my desktop, and I started recording videos that were going out to the community saying, hey, we're here for you. We are going to produce content, and we're going to do it in a timely fashion, and we're going to figure out how to make it a viable, make Lend It FinTech a viable solution for you to get the same information you needed, but not on an annual calendar. We're going to do this every day. And from that realization came, or from that decision came the realization that in 2019 and 18 before that and 17 before that, if you look at our company from a GAAP perspective, from an accounting perspective, we were generating revenue 6 days a year. 3 major events, typically 2 events, two days each. So it's a total of 6 days where we're actually performing. And that's when an accountant gets to recognize revenue. We're generating cash throughout the year, and we're, doing all the things, but that's a pretty fragile business model. And it didn't have to take a pandemic to upset it. It could have been, the Queen of England passes away in our month and all of England shuts down and we can't have our UK conference. It could be that the Sino-US relations get kind of muddled and we have to shut down our China conference, which did happen, right? I mean, like little things like that, not little, the big global things like that could just absolutely shellac a huge portion of our business. Well, this new sort of, we're not a 24/7 news organization, but we are a much more regular provider of information and analysis and commentary to our clientele. It turns out that we're making revenue almost every day of the year now. So that's a huge benefit to us. And something we wouldn't have been able to do without a pandemic. So we're very grateful for having been forced into that position, because now we have this fantastic business model that just is, I would say, in a sense, anti-fragile.
Yeah, really good. Resilience was the word I was thinking of. Like a more resilient model that can stand up to some of these, regionalized things that would have disrupted you before. Have you folded in? So talk to me now about some of the main touch points. And then, by the way, you can't start talking about sending videos out. And I'm going to double back on that because I want to know why video. But let's go to the way that the touch points that produce the feelings, the touch points that generate some sense of relationship. How have those changed? I assume you've probably done some, I'm air quoting here, like virtual events. Sounds like you've increased the cadence of some of the activity or communication you were already doing. What do the touch points look like now compared to, say, 12 months ago?
Well, I'll tell you, it's 100% video now. We used to produce a podcast that was just an audio podcast. Well, now we record it on video and we post it in a variety of places so that people can engage in the video. We then will take video snippets of that and post it on LinkedIn, and we'll take the little nuggets and we'll say, okay, this was super interesting. If you only have 15 seconds to pay attention to fintech today, this is it. In 2019, we may have produced 5 or 6 webinars. We've already produced 60, I think, this year. We have a newly launched digital channel called Lend It FinTech Digital that essentially takes the breaking news of this week and turns it into a video discussion next week. So next week, and like in this moment, this is, what day is it today? It's the 9th of November. Time is flying right by. It's almost Christmas. So Ant Financial pulled its IPO. That's super interesting. One of the clients and longtime supporters in our space has filed an IPO. That's interesting. They've done it kind of quietly. So next week we hope to have experts on Lend It FinTech Digital who can really break those issues down and say, okay, what really went on with Ant Financial? Like, did Jack Ma really get dressed down by the central banks and presumably the President Xi? I think so, right? But we're going to find out next week. So that kind of stuff is just so different from what we did last year. So last year, Cadence, you know, like I said, 6 days of actual activity with involving maybe 600 speakers, and hundreds of thousands of square footage and all. It's just and now we're doing, you know, flip it on its head and say, okay, a webinar, a panel, a podcast, a this, a that, and they're all video, and they're all um, trying to be as relevant and timely as possible. It's just a completely different model.
Yeah, so this obviously was not plan B. It wasn't sitting on the shelf ready to be pulled off in the case of something like this, right? So I assume, you and your team got together, you're trying to figure it out. You came up with some immediate, solutions or alternatives. What kind of feedback were you getting from the community? What were some of the positive signs that had you say, okay, this is good. Okay, video is the thing. Okay, people do like this analysis. Like, just talk about that, the feedback from the customer and the community that let you know that you were on the right track.
Well, one thing is we went out to our customers, the businesses that used to sponsor us for the big shows. And we would say, look, we understand you still have a problem. You still need to generate clients. You need those clients now, not in 6 or 12 or 18 months. And so we have these various different products that we've created. Would you be interested in sponsoring one of these? And let's say it's a webinar, a sponsored webinar. Now, I know everyone has Zoom fatigue, but if we produce great content, it doesn't matter if it's sponsored. It doesn't matter if it's at an awkward time of day. What matters is we put on great content and people learn from it and there's interaction. And when we do that, we can repeat that. So one of the very clear indications that we were doing well, we're number one, our clients were willing to pay for those and they were and pay handsomely. And number two, the audience numbers were solid and stayed solid. And so we have hundreds of people coming to these webinars a couple times a week. And that's valuable for us, and that's valuable for our clients, and that's valuable for those that continue to choose to attend those. So really the commercial response was the only one that mattered because it was life and death, right? We're getting the PPP loan, we're cutting staff, we're cutting salaries. Like, we haven't mentioned all the hardship that went along with this. I mean, I mentioned some angst and some emotional stuff, but ego aside, it was brutal. And so the commercial reality of, yeah, we're right. The customers do care about this stuff. They do need this stuff and they're paying for it. That was really the one very loud signal that we got.
Good. Now let's talk a little bit about video. So
Yeah.
you said video several times now. I've also,
I do, even when you're not, on the other end of the phone here.
Well, of course, as is not everyone. I think just a lot of people are still slow to the party, video in a variety of channels. But you've obviously mentioned a relationship a lot. You've talked about humanizing some of these touch points and even humanizing the brand, which is something that we have talked about in a variety of different ways here. For you, was video just the default straight away, or was there any conscious thought about it? Or, what role does video communication play for you? For example, and I guess you can start here.
Sure.
You said, as soon as this happened, I was fortunate enough to take my family up into the mountains, but I took my gear with me and I started communicating with video. Like, why video in that moment? Was that just instinct? And how does that play into the way you think about your business?
I wouldn't, it may be instinctive now, but, or it may be a knee-jerk reaction now, because I'm a huge believer in video. And I am not just saying that because you're listening. I am and have been, especially for complex topics, complex businesses. And we could apply it to a lot of other things, relationship businesses, on and on and on. But every business is a relationship business. It's really important to humanize a brand when the brand is financial, because finance can be very complex. And this is something I learned when we were building that fintech that I mentioned earlier. where uh, we would take these really complex ideas, which is investing in long-term alternative assets, using a robot on lending club to to improve your returns and compound interest and on that and we'd put a person up there like me or one of my colleagues, and we just explain it as simply as we could and just be like, look, this is what we're going to try to do for you. And we're a registered investment advisor, so there's real rules around this, what you can say, what you can promise, what you can't promise, all that stuff. So we just follow those rules and we get on camera, and people responded to that. So when anything important ever has to happen, if I'm fundraising, if if I have bad news to deliver my investors, you better believe I'm doing it on video. So yes, in the spring of 2000, if I'm grabbing one piece of equipment to take with me to the mountains, it's not my snowshoes, it's my camera, right? And my mic and whatever else. So yeah, that is crystal clear to me, and I'm glad the world is climbing on board. I could say, oh, I wish I had preserved some sort of competitive advantage when being the only whatever person on video, but that's silly. I am we are all humanized. Do you remember back in the early part of this, there were so many people who you'd go on a Zoom call with and no one shared their camera, right?
So weird.
And so it was all audio. And so I'd be that one guy down in the bottom corner who's like, has his kids walking in and like there's books and there's dirty laundry and whatever. But that's just that was important to me to portray who I was. And in the full sense of it, it feels like, and in some communities, when we go on Zoom, everybody's on video and we get to see a little bit more about them, and it humanizes them. And it makes me want to do business with them more than if they're just a voice on the other end of the line.
Yeah, or a plain flat email signature. You offered a couple good use cases there for video messages that that I've experienced myself and that a lot of people benefit from, which is one, breaking down the complex and explaining things in layperson's terms in a way that the information is going to be so much. You're going to explain it so much better by speaking it, and someone's going to understand it so much better because you spoke it. And the other one I really like that you mentioned is bad news. I think a lot of people overlook it. Um, there's just so much. And I guess I would extend that to say emotional charge. Anytime that there is a positive or negative emotional charge, apology, I would lump in with bad news as well. It just doesn't come through when you type it out and send it. And so this ability to kind of like be yourself, as long as you're sincere, by the way, if you're not sincere about it, if you don't actually mean it,
It's kind of
because
obvious. Yeah.
we've seen that press conference and it's not, it just becomes an immediate joke, and Twitter has a field day with it, that a non-apology apology from a celebrity or something. So really, really good use cases there. And it's interesting to me, obviously you're deep in fintech, and both the fin side of it and the tech side of it. I can see how that it would at times perhaps minimize the human. And so to the degree we're communicating about it and representing it, I can understand how it was of immediate benefit to you.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I would add is that we are we're able to bridge the gap with relationships better than we thought. And I know many of our clients, when we presented them with an opportunity to join us for one of our virtual events, a large scale event, not the webinars, but we did replicate the large scale events. I shouldn't say that. They were not replicated. we made an effort to put great content on stage and let people network. Well, it turns out video networking is really effective. And we chose our event platform based on networking as opposed to content delivery. And it's interesting. We've had I think it's 19 events since 2013. So large scale events where there's at least 1,000 people, and it's pretty sizable things. And we've measured NPS since 2016, Net Promoter Score, and we had our third largest Net Promoter Score ever for our virtual event, which we hosted in September. And a lot of that was based on the video networking that we provided. And people felt like people were approachable, people were ready to do business, people were open. That was all communicated without a handshake in a two-dimensional surface. And so it is amazing what we can do on video. And we don't need 3D. We don't need holograms. Yeah, someday we'll get there. Fine. But we don't need that, right? What we need is a visual representation. 2D is just fine, of the counterpart we have. And we can convey a lot through that. And so that I think is one of those things that we've now discovered as a society. At least I hope we have.
Yeah, really good. It reminds me of a conversation I had on this podcast with Dan Hill, who's a PhD with, I think, 7 US patents in the analysis of facial coding data. And he's written like 8 books on related topics. And he calls the 25 square inches that include our eyes, nose, and mouth as the richest visual territory on the planet. So to the point of, it's cool if we do all this other stuff, but really, I just need to see your eyes and your nose and your mouth. If I can see your hands or your upper body, even better. But there's just so much rich communication there. So that's great. I'm glad that you got that positive feedback on that event as well. And I appreciate your qualification too on replicating it. No, we didn't replicate it. We did the next best available thing. Yeah, the networking scenarios where you can. Was it one of those where you're kind of randomly paired up with someone else who raised their hand to be networked?
We did do that as well. And that we called networking roulette. And that was really successful as well. In fact, for our USA conference, we had, it was at the tail end of the conference, and we had, it was sponsored by the Department for International Trade at the UK. And we had like 35 fintech entrepreneurs from the UK generally, but let's call it London, who were up at midnight participating in networking roulette. And it was a phenomenal success. The cornerstone of our networking was more of a AI powered matchmaking, where it was like, oh, you have these interests and you're offering these things. You should meet with this person, and then the outreach ensues. And we had just a huge success with that.
Nice. I love it. And it's obviously just such a natural extension of what brought you to create and sustain Lend It FinTech over the years. Okay, every single person listening, and you did a great job off the top offering, like drawing this picture out big, but obviously every single person listening is affected by FinTech. So for kind of like a mainstream type of audience, what are a couple things that you're seeing and hearing that maybe haven't broken through yet that are going to be a real net positive for someone listening?
Yeah.
Like kind of a mainstream US consumer, I guess.
Right. So, I mean, I think, so when I look at FinTech and I look at the sort of the things that I think I'm most excited about hitting our economy are really just there are a couple major themes. It's transparency and it's friction. And so increased transparency for the financial system to understand what's really happening with the private enterprise. So consider a bank, or consider a small business, a barber shop, a flower shop, a mechanic shop, or an online company that's selling on, that has mainly digital goods. For that company to be started and then financed and then refinanced and then grown, there's this really difficult opacity between what the entrepreneur knows and what the investor knows. And the harder it is for the investor to understand what's really going on in that business, the higher the cost of capital. So that's why all these businesses are started on credit cards. No one believes the entrepreneur is going to be successful. No banks are willing to take a risk. Banks are actually not in the risk capital business. And even venture capitalists, And I used to be a VC out in Silicon Valley for a number of years. We were not, we were very risk averse, right? And that's the extreme of the capital providers. All the entrepreneurs in America and all over the world are betting on themselves. And fintech can make it. This is a big claim here. Just hold on to your seats. Fintech can make it so that it's more transparent all the way through the capital chain, so that the capital providers can understand the businesses better, faster, and then provide capital on a cheaper basis to entrepreneurs who deserve cheaper capital. And for those that aren't getting traction, yeah, it's tough. Maybe your idea didn't take off. Maybe you do have to make more bets on yourself. But as we can improve that transparency and efficiency of capital flow, the cost of starting a business goes down. And all of a sudden we'll see an absolute revival of Main Street. And no better time than now, because we're going to have a desperate need for Main Street to be reinvented. Now, this vision I have of perfect transparency and low cost of capital is not coming in time for the post-COVID reality. It's a long time away. We're talking many, many years, but we're on the path, and it is extremely complex, and it goes well beyond just number crunching and into a lot of other things. Like you said, the 25 square inches of the face are going to play a role as well. So that is something that I would just sort of put in a nutshell as saying, like, if there's one positive impact I'm looking forward to, it's that entrepreneurs can have an easier path to cheaper capital faster.
I love it. It's so encouraging. I had not given any of that any thought. It is consistent with other trends toward transparency throughout chains of relationships and activities, which obviously increases trust, which accelerates everything. So it makes sense that you're seeing it from your seat as well. It's awesome. It reminds me of another conversation I had here. I think we called it the end-to-end transparency trend, which rhymes, and so it's delightful. If you're listening to Bo and I right now, you obviously enjoyed the topic. I've got a couple more that I know you'll enjoy. The first one is episode 85 with Corey McCarthy, who I mentioned before. She's CMO at Socio Events, and that one was called How to Pivot Successfully to a Virtual Event. She had a very unique situation where not only did they have to pivot a lot of the activity they were doing as a marketing organization, they also needed to help their customers do the same. So that was really a good one too. And if you're interested in the community aspect of what we talked about today, bringing people together, oftentimes including competitors or what might seem on paper like strange bedfellows, episode 84 with Sangram Vajre, co-founder and chief evangelist at Terminus and the founder of a couple communities. That's episode 84. We call that 10 Rules for Building a Category and a Community. Bo, this has been really interesting, and I love that hopeful note that you left us with there with that last response. Is better than I could have asked for. But before I let you go, I'm going to have you thank or mention someone who's had a positive impact on your life or your career. Sure. And then maybe give a shout out or a mention to a brand or a company you appreciate for the experience that they deliver for you as a customer.
All Colorado people here, Ethan.
Okay.
First, I'll thank my family. They have stood by me through thick and thin, and it has been a pleasure to serve them and to learn from them as they provide me all the lessons I need to become successful. I often say, like, look, I'm a better entrepreneur because I've learned how to manage my family a little bit better. And by manage, I don't mean like, getting them to take out the trash. I just mean like, understand that this is a complex relationship and I need to develop it and show up as my best self to get them to be their best selves. So that's slam dunk family, my wife, Amy, and my 5 kids. Company, that's also a Colorado one that is super inspiring. And this is a company out of Boulder called Hop Tea. Have you come across Hop Tea?
I know Hop Tea very well. My longtime friend and CMO and co-author of Rehumanize Your Business, Steve Passanelli, turned me on to Hop Tea. They do awesome work, and the subscription around it, the limited releases. Yes.
No, go.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
With Hop Tea. Sorry, that's the short take. Tell me your experience with them.
So Dean Eberhardt is a dear friend of mine and one of the co-founders of Hop Tea. And I was in a room with him several years ago when he was struggling with this idea of like he had all these little pockets of inspiration where he's like, I could do this and I could do that. And in one of these pockets of inspiration was this Hop Tea that he had created, and we all thought was pretty doggone good. And because he'd bring us like I forget if it was in a bottle or a can or whatever, but he had this little enterprise going on in the back of his. It wasn't an enterprise. He had this lab in his garage where he would brew this stuff, and so he made the decision to go all in. And from that moment, everything became clear. And as you've been watching, I'm sure the innovation and the genius that goes on inside those four walls with the 20 or so people that they have is impacting thousands of people. And it's just a beverage, but it is incredible and it's life-changing. And I especially love this one story that Dean told where he got an email from I think it was an email from a consumer who was an alcoholic and really missed the taste of beer. And she was in Whole Foods and looking at this end cap where Hop Tea was being marketed. And her boyfriend was like, give it a shot. How bad can it be? Like it says it tastes like a beer, non-alcohol, no calories, like it's completely sin-free. Give it a shot. She bought it and she drank it and she started crying. And I'm like, Dean, you have moved mountains. So I want to give Dean a shout out and just say that is brilliant work.
Yeah, it's awesome. We are beer nerds, and obviously the thing that just turned me on completely to beer years ago was a single hop flight, and so it was just this movement from pine and resin on one end to the bright floral on the other end, just like this little journey of short pours. And so, what we're talking about here is like a carbonated beverage, but it's brewed with some of the most flavorful and interesting hops available, completely non-alcoholic for a variety of benefits. Of course, the non-alcoholic movement's gotten really good in general, and certainly Hop Tea is one of the more interesting. I don't know if we call them pioneers or not, but certainly one of the more interesting products and companies in the space. And the subscription model, and again, the limited releases, it's got all the appeal of this kind of like, that even the most hardcore craft beer nerd can be turned on by the dynamics that they've created in addition to the product that they've created. I love that you went there. It's really good.
Yeah, truly. It's and back to why they inspire. I mean, it is that moment of going all in. It's an important moment. And then, but not saying, okay, this is the one product, but then pouring all your energy into that vision of, we are creating a category, like you mentioned before, and now we're going to create our community around it. So, boy, that just ties it all together, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. So well done. This has been an absolute pleasure, Bo. And obviously, if someone's listening now, they felt the same way. So, how can someone connect with you or with Lend It FinTech, or where would you send someone to follow up on this conversation?
Sure, I'm easy to find. If you know how to spell my last name, I'm one of a few Bruskerns in America. The others are related to me in some way, either very closely or distantly. We're all cousins. So my email address, bo@lendit.com. Feel free to reach out to me. Happy to help, especially if you're in the Colorado area. But you know what? There's not a lot of boundaries anymore. So we'll jump on a video and we'll have a chat. Lendit is just at lendit.com, lendit.com.
Awesome. Innovating and transforming the lending space in all of its forms. Really great conversation with you. Enjoyed it very much. And for folks who want to see some video clips from this, they want a link to Hop Tea in case you can't remember it. Remember, bombbomb.com/podcast. We link up a variety of things that we mentioned in the conversation, as well as drop in some video clips and a short write-up, and of course, all the embedded audio as well. Bo, thank you so much. And thank you to you for listening to this episode of the Customer Experience Podcast.
Thanks, Ethan.